The winds that blew from the shivering sea carried no warmth, only the echo of things Jon Snow thought he'd left behind. He stood on the deck of the Iron Whisper, the Golden Company's flagship, staring at the faint shape of Westeros breaking. Through the mist, the land of his birth, the land he once bled for, and now the land he would take. He was no longer Lord Commander, no longer the broken boy of the Night's Watch, and certainly no longer the guilt-ridden Targaryen who stabbed Daenerys in the heart. That man had died beyond the wall. The Golden Company behind him was restless. They'd followed Blackfyres, princes, and pirates, but never a man like Jon. They knew his name carried weight. Not just in Westeros, but across Essos, where whispers of the Dragon Bastard had stirred camps and courts alike. They respected him, not just because he was a warrior, but because he had something they all desired, a cause big enough to justify. Their price, the cause wasn't just gold, it was revenge. He thought often of Daenerys, of the way her body had crumpled in his arms, the warmth leading her eyes, the betrayal on her lips. He hadn't cried not then, not after, not even when Drogon screamed and vanished into the sky. But the guilt grew like rot. He was exiled, not formally, but in truth, sent to the wall, cast out as punishment and mercy both. Ghost was his only companion for months. Even the free folk kept their distance. He was a killer, a kinslayer, a man torn between too many houses and names. And then one night the ravens came, letters from Essos, offers from captains. And then a man in black and gold, face scarred, voice soaked in wine and venom, Sir Mark of the Golden Company. "You want peace, Lord Snow?" he'd said. "Then take it, with sword and fire, with the army of men who don't care what blood runs in your veins, as long as it's willing to spill." Jon refused at first, but the wall offered no purpose, the north no welcome, and the memory of Daenerys haunted every snowy ridge. Eventually, he rode south, not toward Winterfell, but toward Braavos. The Golden Company took him in with doubt at first, but his skill silenced that. His command of strategy and battle won them over. When he killed a mutinous commander in single combat on the Slavers' Road, the men cheered. They didn't care who he was, only that he could lead them somewhere better. And he did. In 5 months, they seized 4 free cities, raided Lannisport ships, and built alliances with exiled Westerosi. Lords hungry for a second chance. All Jon needed was a name to rally them. Not Stark, not Snow, not even Targaryen. Just King. Now, as Westeros drew closer, he wondered what Sansa would say, or Arya, if she still lived. He wondered if Tyrion still languished in some cell, or if Bran still sat the throne on his ghostly throne of wood and whispering ravens. He hadn't written to any of them. Why would he? He hadn't come for talks. He'd come for the North. And he'd come with 10,000 swords of the Golden Company behind him. "Landfall in 1 hour," said Sir Mark, stepping beside him. "Shall I send ravens ahead?" "No," Jon replied, eyes fixed on the coast. "No more messages. They'll know we've come soon enough." Mark smirked. Spoken like a king. Jon turned. "I'm not their king." "Yet," said the knight. The ships hit the shore like steel ghosts in the fog silent swift, and without warning. Jon stood at the front of the landing column, boots sinking slightly into the damp sands of Cracklaw Point, that twisted, forgotten finger of land nestled between the Stormlands and the Crownlands. It wasn't where most invasions began. That was why he chose it. They had no banners raised, no horns, no colors, but dull black and muted gold, a company of killers dressed like shadows. Jon didn't want glory sung in songs. He wanted results. Quiet conquest, not roaring declarations. Within a day, they had taken a small coastal holdfast. The local lordling tried to resist. Tried. Jon gave him one chance to yield. The man spat on the ground and called him Targaryen filth. By morning, his keep flew the sigil of the Golden Company, and his head was staked at the gates. Jon didn't feel pride, only necessity. He spent the night walking the ramparts alone, while the mercenaries drank and whored below. He didn't partake. He never had. The only warmth he ever really knew had burned in dragonfire at the steps of King's Landing. And it had died with Daenerys. He didn't dream of her anymore. Instead, he dreamed of wolves turning their backs on him, of ravens whispering secrets he didn't want to hear, of snowstorms hiding blades in the wind. Winterfell will hear of this soon, said Sir Mark, joining him in the cold. What then? Do we march north? Jon said nothing. You know they won't welcome you. I know. They'll call you traitor, madman, kinslayer. I am. Then why take it? Jon looked out at the sea. Because if I don't, someone worse will, Mark scoffed, still clinging to that tired Stark morality. I'm not a Stark, Jon said coldly. Not anymore. He didn't know who he was. Truth be told, Aegon Targaryen? That name felt like a lie stitched over a dead man's life. Jon Snow? That boy had died beyond the wall. Now he was something else. Something sharper, colder. The next week they advanced fast. The Golden Company moved like wildfire in dry grass. They took Hayford, Duskendale, and Rossby in quick succession, small castles, lightly defended, unprepared for a man they thought exiled. Jon gave lords the same choice each time: bend the knee and survive, or defy him and die. Many knelt. A few didn't. The executions were swift, not cruel. But word spread quickly of the bastard in black and gold, the man who rode under no house, claimed no title, and burned his way toward the capital with an army of sellswords and forgotten banners. In the Red Keep, ravens came gaily with messages of chaos. Queen Sansa, the rumor said, had called her banners. Lord Gendry in Storm's End had begun raising men. Bran, well, no one truly knew what the boy king thought. But one message reached Jon that night at Rossby. It was left in his chambers, unsigned, sealed with no crest, just pressed wax. Inside was only a line written in a shaky hand. She trusted you. I hope it was worth it. There was no name. But he didn't need one. Tyrion. Jon burned the letter without reply. By the third week, his men had taken Maidenpool and were eyeing Harrenhal. Jon gathered his captains inside a crumbling feasting hall. Maps were spread on old oak, and the air reeked of wet stone and ambition. The Riverlands will stand with us, said Mark. Tully's gone soft. The Freys are scattered. All we need now is Winterfell, Jon said. The room fell quiet. They'll fight, said a grizzled veteran. Your kin won't welcome you. I'm not here for welcome, Jon said. I'm here for peace. The kind no one else has the stomach to keep. And if your sister won't yield? Jon's hand rested on the hilt of Longclaw. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because if the North rose against him, he would cut it down. Snow fell as they approached the outer hills of the Neck, thick and wet, painting the world in shades of gray. It was the kind of snow Jon remembered from his youth, when he still wore the black of the Night's Watch, when the cold had felt honest. Now it just felt like a warning. He rode at the front of the column, Longclaw across his back, Ghost padding silently at his side. The direwolf had grown leaner, quieter, and somehow more brutal, like his master. Behind him, thousands marched mercenaries. From Lys and Tyrosh, exiled Westerosi knights, broken men who'd found a cause in the gold and the cold eyes of a bastard-turned king. The Golden Company moved like a kingdom without a crown. disciplined but soulless, waiting for someone to give them meaning. They followed Jon not out of love, but fear and maybe a little awe. At Moat Cailin they met resistance. It was a quiet fight, no trumpets, no banners, no heroes. Just blood in the snow and screams in the fog. The Ironburn, sent by Queen Sansa to guard the Neck, held the fortress as best they could. But the Golden Company had siege weapons, scorpions, trained, war elephants armored in black steel. By dusk, the marshland stronghold was drenched in red. Jon stood atop the broken tower and looked northward. Winterfell. He hadn't spoken her name in months, not even in his thoughts. Sansa, his sister, his queen, the last Stark in Winterfell. The next day, a raven came bearing her reply. Jon opened it in private, his gloves soaked with melting snow. Turn back, or face the full wrath of the North. You are not welcome here. You are not my brother. There was no signature, no warmth, just cold truth on a piece of parchment. He crushed it in his hand. Sir Mark entered quietly. Should I give the order to advance? Jon didn't speak. He walked past him, toward the makeshift war table. On the map, he marked the southern edge of the Wolfswood. They'll dig in there, he said. Ambush tactics, staggered cavalry. We'll set traps, light fires to draw them out. You're sure? I've fought in the north. I know their games. Mark nodded. And if the queen herself comes to the field? Jon looked up, his voice like a blade unsheathed. Then I pray she's brought a good sword. By weeks. The Golden Company reached the borders of the north proper. Small villages were already abandoned, some out of fear, others torched as warnings. The air was thick with tension, not just among the northerners, but within Jon's own ranks. Some Westerosi mercenaries began whispering doubts. He'd heard them, calling him a traitor, a Targaryen snake, the Kinslayer king. It didn't bother him, not much. But one night, a captain tried to desert, taking 50 men with him. Jon caught him before he left the camp. You served under Blackfires and pirates, Jon said, as the man knelt before him, bloody and beaten. You didn't flinch for coin. Why flinch now? You asked me to kill Starks, the man rasped. Wolves. I may be a sellsword, but I'm still a man. Jon stared down at him. So am I. Then, without ceremony, he drew Longclaw and ended the man's life. One strike, clean. But his face lingered in Jon's mind, like every other one he'd had to silence. That night, he sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. Ghost lay at his side, head low, growling softly into the dark. He thought of Robb, of Bran, of Arya and Rickon, of Ned, and of the crypts below Winterfell. He wondered if his bones would ever rest there, or if they'd be left rotting in foreign soil, unloved, unwanted, unburied. He had thought peace would come when he left the wall, when he raised his sword for something bigger than himself. But all it had brought was more blood, more ghosts. By dawn, word came that the northern forces had been sighted. A full host, thousands strong. Sansa led them herself. And behind her, banners of the Vale, the Riverlands, even House Mormont flew high. Jon mounted his horse in silence. War it is, then, said Sir Mark. Jon looked north, his voice hollow. No, this isn't war. This is family. The battlefield was a frozen plain at the edge of the Wolfswood, where the snow clung to the grass like ash, and the sky hung low, heavy with gray. No birds sang, no wind blew. Just the breath of thousands, fogging in the cold, and the low, distant sound of steel being readied. Jon sat atop his horse, cloaked in black and gold, but beneath it all, his chest ached under layers of chain and guilt. The Golden Company stretched wide behind him, spears lined in grim rows, siege weapons hauled on wheels, war elephants snorting in the chill. His army looked like a nightmare conjured from Essos foreign, deadly, and without a shred of mercy. And across from them stood home. The northern army lined the ridge, a wall of fur-clad men, shields painted with dire wolves, bears, and falcons. Stark, Mormont, Arryn, knights of the Vale on horseback, archers positioned in the trees, and at the center, wearing the thick gray cloak of House Stark, sat Sansa. Her face was pale against the red of her hair, lips tight, eyes unreadable. Beside her stood Sir Davos, older now, slower maybe, but still loyal to her, not him. Jon exhaled slowly. His hands trembled. He didn't want this. Not like this. He remembered Sansa from before. The girl who'd survived Cersei, Ramsay, and Littlefinger. The sister who had looked him in the eye the day he left for the Wall, and told him, "You may be a bastard, but you're mine." Now, she looked at him like he was something rotten, something dangerous. Jon rode forward alone. So did she. They met between the two armies, flurries dancing between them like falling ashes. Sansa pulled her hood back. Her eyes were sharp, her voice sharper. "You should have stayed beyond the wall. I didn't come to fight you." Then why? Bring an army? "Because no one listens without force," Jon said, voice heavy with tiredness. "Because the South is broken, and peace doesn't grow from broken things." She looked him over, her voice bitter. "You sound like Daenerys." He winced. "Don't pretend this is noble, Jon. You marched with mercenaries. You burned villages. You beheaded a lord sworn to Winterfell. That isn't peace. That's conquest. I gave them a choice." "So did she?" Sansa snapped. "Before she burned King's Landing to the bones." Jon flinched. Her words were daggers in his chest. "I didn't come for the Iron Throne," he said quietly. "I don't want that. I never did." "What do you want then?" He looked up at her, voice soft. "Home." Sansa's expression cracked for just a moment. A flicker of pain. Then it hardened again. "You stopped being my brother the moment you raised a sword against our people." "I never raised a sword against the North." "No?" she said. "Then what do you call Moat Cailin? What do you call the fire and steel behind you?" Jon hesitated. "I call it protection. For a land that's about to be torn apart again. King's Landing is broken. The Reach is leaderless. The Iron Islands. Raid the coasts. And beyond the narrow sea, more armies gather. You think they'll listen to you? A bastard with a Sellsword army? I think they'll listen to peace," Jon said. "If someone strong enough to make war offers them another way." Sansa studied him, snow clinging to her lashes. "You think you're strong enough to rule all this?" "No," Jon whispered, "but I know what happens when the wrong person does." She turned her horse. "Then put down your sword. Disband your army. Come home with me." Jon felt his throat. "Close. I can't." "Why?" "Because it's too late." Sansa said nothing for a long moment. Then she gave the smallest nod to the riders behind her. The archers shifted. The wolves growled. The Vale Knights unsheathed swords. "So be it," she said, not turning back. She didn't look at him again. Jon sat on his horse long after she was gone. The snow thickened. The silence grew heavy. Behind him, Sir Mark approached. "What's the order, King Snow?" Jon closed his eyes. Then, without looking back, he said, "Tell the men to prepare. We march at dawn." Dawn broke like a knife across the sky cold, colorless, and silent. No trumpets, no war cries. Just the soft crunch of boots in snow, and the restless shifting of armor as both armies moved into position. The earth seemed to groan beneath the weight of what was coming. John stood with his commanders on a ridge overlooking the Wolfswood clearing. Below, the northern forces had formed tight ranks, their formations sharp and disciplined. House Mormont's banner flapped in the wind beside. The proud falcon of House Arryn, the direwolf of Stark, towered over all, stark gray against blood-red cloth. Behind John, the Golden Company waited, quiet, patient. They were used to blood, used to fighting wars that weren't their own. But even they seemed to sense this one was different. This wasn't just another contract. This was a man marching against his own. Sir Mark approached him, cloak dragging through the frost. The men are in place. Shall we sound the signal? John didn't answer right away. His hand rested on Longclaw, not drawn yet, but ready. Always ready now. He didn't want this. Gods help him, he didn't. But peace never came without blood. Not in Westeros. Not in this cursed world. He finally gave the order. No signal. No horns. Just march. Sir Mark gave a strange look. You sure? Most armies like to. They'll hear the war in our footsteps, John said flatly. We don't need to announce death. And so they advanced quiet as falling snow, deadly as a storm. The Golden Company swept forward like a tide. Pikes lowered, cavalry in formation, archers flanking on both sides. John rode at the front, Ghost running beside his black steed like a ghost in the mist. From the ridge, the Northerners surged to meet them. The two armies crashed like thunder, the first blow like a crack splitting the air. Screams erupted, steel clashed. Arrows rained from both sides. Blood sprayed the snow, turning white into crimson. John dismounted the moment he breached the front. Line fighting on foot as always. He wasn't the kind of commander to hide behind men. He fought with Longclaw in hand, cutting down foes with efficient, brutal precision. His black cloak whipped behind him, stained now with gore. A northern knight rushed him screaming a curse. John ducked the swing and drove his sword through the man's chest without hesitation. He recognized the sigil. A reed from Greywater Watch. He paused only long enough to whisper, "Forgive me," before pulling the blade free. The battle raged for hours. Fire spread across the tree line. War elephants crushed men beneath hooves. And Northern cavalry pushed hard on the left flank, forcing John to regroup twice. But the Golden Company held disciplined, ruthless, trained, in blood. At the center of it all, John moved like a ghost of vengeance. Until he saw her. Sansa. She was on horseback, surrounded by her personal guard, shouting orders with the fury of a true Stark queen. Her hair was tied back, blood on her. Cheek, eyes hard as stone. She didn't see him at first. But then she did. Their eyes met across the chaos. Time slowed. She raised her hand, and John heard the order, "Loose." 100 Northern archers loosed their arrows at once. John rolled behind a broken shield wall, barely escaping. Around him, 3 of his. Closest men fell, pierced through the neck, chest, face. He didn't cry out. He didn't falter. But something inside him cracked. Not from pain, from grief. She meant it. She truly meant to kill him. She wasn't bluffing. She wasn't trying to scare him back into brotherhood. She had chosen war, and now so would he. He rose from the ground, blood smeared on his face, eyes wild. Ghost howled beside him as if sensing the shift. Push forward. John roared, louder than any horn. Take the center. Do not stop. The Golden Company roared with him, and the advance resumed with renewed fury. He was done hesitating, done waiting for mercy from a world that had never offered it. If they wanted a bastard-turned king, if they wanted a kinslayer in golden armor, they would get him. The battle stretched into the cold gut of afternoon. The sun hung low behind gray clouds, casting a sickly light over the field. What had once been pristine snow was now churned mud and shattered bodies, limbs twisted in frozen agony, banners burned and unrecognizable. The cries of the dying rang. Beneath the clang of steel, an unholy chorus that refused to end. Jon Snow, the bastard prince, was soaked in blood, not all of it his own. His breath came in gasps, his muscles ached, but his resolve was a fortress. Every swing of Loneclaw cut deeper than just flesh. It carved away whatever innocence remained inside him. If he had once been a man who fought to protect, now he fought only to win. His army was pushing hard. The right flank had broken through the Mormont line, crushing it beneath the elephants. The center, where Jon led the charge, had driven back Sansa's bannermen step by painful step. The left flank still struggled. Vale Knights were not easily cowed, but the tide had turned. Still, something in Jon's chest twisted each time a northern warrior fell beneath his blade. These were his people once, his kin. He saw boys no older than he'd been at Castle Black, men with stark emblems sewn to their cloaks, women archers in fur hoods with grim faces that might have smiled at him in another life. And now they died by his hand. He moved like a spirit of vengeance through the carnage, until a voice broke through the clamor. Snow. He turned. A man charged at him on horseback, sword raised, blue cloak trailing behind. Not just any man, Sir Davos, the Onion Knight. Jon's heart skipped. Davos swung from the saddle, blade gleaming. You shouldn't have come here, lad. Jon blocked the blow, staggering from the force. Neither should you. You were like a son to me, Davos shouted, driving forward. And now you bring sellswords and fire to your own door. They exchanged strikes, each one fierce, but lacking that final edge. Neither wanted to kill the other. But the world had changed, and mercy was running thin. Jon caught Davos's sword on Loneclaw's flat and twisted. The older man grunted, stumbled back, fell to one knee in the snow. End it, Davos said, coughing blood. Jon hesitated. Then, with a grunt, he kicked Davos's sword away and stepped back. I won't kill you. You already did, Davos rasped. The boy I knew is long gone. Before Jon could reply, a trumpet sounded behind him. He turned, and his heart froze. The direwolf banner had fallen. The northern line was breaking. He could see Sansa now, pulled back with her guard, retreating. Up a ridge as Jon's forces poured in. Her horse stumbled from a wound. She barely held control. If they reached her, it would be over. She would be captured or worse. No, Jon breathed. No, no, no. He started running, not giving orders, not flanked by soldiers, just running, through blood, through fire, through chaos. He cut down 2 northern soldiers who tried to block his path. He didn't recognize them, didn't care. 2. All that mattered was Sansa, his sister, his queen, the last true Stark. She was surrounded now. Her guard fought to protect her, but the Golden Company were everywhere, blades flashing, merciless. He reached them just as one man tall, armored, nameless, raised a pike toward her. Jon drove Loneclaw through the man's back before the strike landed. Sansa gasped. Their eyes met. She didn't thank him. She didn't curse him either. She just stared, wide-eyed and trembling, as if seeing a ghost. He turned to face the rest of her attackers, cutting them down one by one, like a wolf gone mad. No commands, no strategy, just fury. The fury of a man protecting what was left of his soul. When it was over, silence fell around them. The snow whispered. The battle had slowed. Jon stood, breath ragged, Loneclaw dripping red. Sansa was still on her horse, frozen. He took a step toward her. Sansa, don't, she whispered. Her hand trembled. Her eyes glistened. You think this means anything? That saving me redeems you? He swallowed. I didn't want this, but you chose it. He looked down, fists clenched. End it, she said. Take me. Claim your crown. That's why you came, isn't it? Jon looked up and whispered, No. He dropped his sword. All around them, the battle had ended. His men held the field. The North had fallen. But Jon had never looked more defeated. Snow began to fall again, light, silent, like the sky was trying to cover up the violence below. The battlefield, once a frenzy of steel and screams, was now a graveyard of the broken. Smoke rose from burning wagons, the stench of blood thick. In the air, crows circled above. The silence was so complete it almost hurt. Jon stood in the center of it all, Longclaw lying at his feet, the tip buried in slush and mud. Around him, the Golden Company stood victorious. Behind him, mercenaries cheered, stripping armor off the dead, tending to their wounded, looting what little remained of the northern camp. But Jon didn't move. His hands were blood-stained and trembling. His breath came slow, heavy with everything he had just done, everything he couldn't undo. Sansa sat atop her wounded horse a few paces away, her face pale as frost, eyes locked on him like he was some monster she no longer recognized. Sir Mark approached, smug and grinning, wiping blood off his blade. Victory, your grace, he said, with mock nobility. Winterfell lies open. The North bends the knee or burns. Say the word. Jon didn't look at him. Secure the wounded, he said quietly. Feed the prisoners. No more killing. Mark blinked. Pardon? Jon turned slowly, eyes hard and empty. If I see another sword drawn, another unarmed man gutted, I will bury whoever's responsible, personally. The smile on Mark's face died. He gave a slight nod and retreated. Sansa hadn't moved. Jon walked toward her, each step through, the snow feeling like he was walking through the ashes of everything they'd once shared. When he reached her, he gently placed his hand on the bridle of her horse. Come down, he said softly. No, she whispered. I'm not going to hurt you. You already have. He closed his eyes. Sansa slid off the horse, landing unsteadily. Her leg was injured, blood leaking through her thick riding leathers. She tried to stand tall, but she swayed. Jon moved to steady her, and she flinched like he was fire. He pulled back. What now? She asked bitterly. Do you put me in chains? Parade me through the streets like a usurper? I don't want your crown. Then why did you take it? Because no one else would keep it safe. She laughed, a cruel, tired sound. You think you've saved the North? I think I stopped it from burning, he said. When I stabbed Daenerys, I thought I was saving the world. But the world doesn't want saving. It wants rulers, strong ones, dangerous ones. So I became one. And now? Now I want it to stop. They stared at each other, surrounded by blood and smoke and silence. She spoke slowly. You can never undo this, Jon. You know that, don't you? You raised a foreign army. You spilled northern blood. You killed our bannermen, our people. I know. And yet you stand there, asking for peace. I'm not asking, he said quietly. I'm offering. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. There's nothing left between us. There's Ghost, he said with a sad smile, trying. He still likes you. She looked down at the direwolf, who sat a few paces away, ears drooped, his white fur streaked with red. You should have stayed beyond the wall, she murmured. You were free there. I thought I was, Jon whispered. But all. I found there was silence, and ghosts. A horn blew in the distance, one of his. A signal from the scouts. Sir Mark returned, armor scratched, voice grim. We have riders approaching. Stark banners, but not hostile. They're carrying a white flag. Jon's chest tightened. Who? Mark handed him a scroll, freshly sealed, damp with snow. Jon opened it. His face darkened as he read. What is it? Sansa asked. He looked up, eyes colder than the snow. Around them. Bran is dead, Sansa gasped. How? Poison. In the Red Keep? They found Mester Bros hanging from the rafters. Mark's voice dropped. King's Landing's gone quiet. Lord Gendry's declared himself protector of the realm. He's calling for your head and the Golden Company's disbandment. Sansa's lips parted. Bran. He was the last ... Jon looked north, toward the smoking tree line, then south, to where the realm bled into chaos once more. There is no realm left, he said bitterly. Only claimants, pretenders, Lars. Mark asked cautiously, Do we press for King's Landing? Jon stared at him, then at Sansa. No, he said. We march to Winterfell. You'd still go back there? She asked, voice shaking. I didn't come to take a crown, Jon said. I came to bury our dead. And this time she didn't stop him. The gates of Winterfell stood open. Not in surrender. There simply weren't enough men left to close them. The few who remained old mesters, broken guards, children who had fled the battle and returned with wide, fearful eyes watched from the walls as Jon Snow rode through. The gates, black cloak torn and bloodstained, the Golden Company behind him in grim silence. No cheers met them. No welcome. Just the sound of horses' hooves crunching snow and the wind howling through the towers. Winterfell had never looked more like a grave. Sansa rode beside him, her leg bandaged, face pale but proud. She didn't look at Jon, not as they passed. The yard where she had learned to sew, not as they crossed the path where Arya had once practiced with a wooden sword. Not even when they reached the great hall, where Ned Stark had once sat and handed out justice like it still meant something. The hall was empty now, cold. Jon stood at the center of it, looking around like a man who had returned to a burned house, knowing he was the one who'd lit the match. I never wanted to rule this place, he said aloud, mostly to himself. Sansa didn't answer. She stared at the high seat, her seat now, by right, and said nothing. Outside, the snow thickened. The dead from the battle were being carried in, laid in rows by the godswood. No words were spoken, no songs sung. There were too many for mourning. Jon walked alone to the crypts later that night, torch in hand. He passed the carved faces of Stark's long-dead Lyanna, Rickard, Benjen, Ned. He paused at his father's statue, or the man he once believed was his father. Ned's face stared ahead, solemn, cold, as if carved from Jon's guilt itself. I failed them, Jon whispered, every one of them. I killed for peace, but all I ever made was silence. He turned to go and found Sansa behind him. She looked tired, older than her years. They didn't want peace, she said softly. They wanted a protector, a name to follow, a symbol. I was never that, Jon replied. No, she said. You were something worse. His mouth tightened. A betrayer. A Stark, she said instead. Too loyal, too proud, too ready to die for the sake of others. Jon looked away. She stepped closer. The North will never love you again. You know that. I don't need their love. But you need their trust, she said. And that you'll have to earn again, if you can. He nodded. I'll try. No, she said. You'll do. Or you'll leave. He looked at her. You're still queen here. Not anymore. That caught him off guard. What? I lost the battle. I lost our men. You saved me, even if it's the last thing I wanted. The lords will want you now, not me. I don't. But you have it. But you have it. They stood in silence, 2 survivors. 2 Starks by blood, by war, by loss. At dawn, Jon addressed what was left of the northern councilmesters, old lords, house representatives. He stood in the great hall, not on the dais, but below it, where common men stood. "I brought fire to my own home," he said. "I broke faith. I took up arms not to rule, but to stop the realm from burning again. And now the realm is ash, again." He looked them all in the eye. "I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I offer peace. And I ask this: let Winterfell be ruled by someone who understands it, someone who hasn't forgotten its people." He turned to Sansa. "I yield the North to its rightful queen." A murmur filled the room. Even Sir Mark, leaning in the shadows, raised an eyebrow. Sansa looked at Jon like she didn't know whether to thank him or spit. But she stepped forward, raised her chin, and said only, "So let it be done." Jon turned to leave. "You're not staying?" she asked. He paused. "I don't belong here anymore." "And where will you go?" He looked toward the window. "Where peace doesn't need a crown to exist." He left that same night. No farewells, no titles, no throne. Just ghost, the cold wind, and the road ahead. Behind him, Winterfell lit its hearts again. But Jon Snow walked into the snowstorm alone, no longer seeking peace. Just penance.